Today we're going to look at the 1 minute sit-up test, in which the purpose is to assess a performer's muscular endurance of their abdominal muscles. This would be an appropriate fitness test for most racket sport players, as well as kayakers or canoeists, where rotation in the upper body is very important to performers. Prior to completing the sit-up test, the performer needs to make sure that they've warmed up sufficiently, increasing their heart rate, increasing their body temperature, as well as stretching dynamically their abdominal muscles. This both increases performance potential and reduces the risk of injury. To prepare for the sit-up test, the performer needs to be lying down on a supporting surface such as a mat, but definitely a non-abrasive surface. Their feet should be flat on the surface, their knees bent to 90-degree angle, and their hands should be resting at the base of their thighs. Following a starting sound or word, an assistant starts a 60-second timer. The performer now has this much time to perform as many technically correct sit-ups. The criteria for a technically correct sit-up is that the feet remain flat on the surface, their knees remain at 90 degrees, and the performer's hands slide up from the base of their thighs, up their thighs so that their fingers just curl over and touch their kneecaps. Ideally, their shoulders will leave the floor first, and their body then rounds or curls upwards so that by the time their hands reach the top of their knees, just their lower back is remaining in contact with the floor surface. They should then reverse this progress, returning back to being flat on the surface before they complete their next repetition. The assistant is there to check the correctness of each sit-up, as well as count how many successful ones they complete in that 60-second window. Due to the nature of the sit-up test, large amounts of lactic acid are going to be produced inside the abdominal muscles. Because of this, the performer shouldn't try to re-attempt this sit-up test within the same day. Instead, they should wait, fully recover, and then re-attempt it so that they can then average out their score and get a more accurate and reliable piece of data. Regardless, if they make repeat attempts, they can take their score, compare it to normative data tables, and they can ascertain if they are above, at or below average according to their age and gender. With the 1 minute sit-up test, there are a number of benefits and drawbacks. We're going to look at the benefits first. The first benefit is that it requires very minimal equipment. So long as the person has a supportive surface and a 60-second timer, they can successfully complete this test. The second benefit is that it's a very quick test. Following a sufficient warm-up, it only takes 1 minute to complete this fitness test. This means a performer can quickly return to whatever it is they were doing in their fitness training session. A third benefit is that if we are dealing with an experienced performer who's completed this test before and they know the correct technique, then they could self-administer the 1 minute sit-up test. They could set the timer on loud, they could complete and count their sit-ups, and they could track their own progress over time. And finally, a fourth benefit is that this fitness test is appropriate for a wide range of athletes. Yes, I spoke earlier about the racket sports, the kayak, the canoeists, but in most sports, abdominal strength and endurance is a vital part because it plays such a key role in stability and balance. Now for some potential drawbacks. The first one being that the technique of a sit-up is subjective, it's open for interpretation. So two assistants watching the same performer might arrive at two different results. This isn't good for the test's reliability because how do we know that the score produced is actually the correct one? Good practice would be to have the same assistant watching the same performer in repeat trials of this test. Alternatively, to have 2 or 3 assistants watching the same performer and then they average out their own scores. And a second drawback is that it does require high levels of motivation because of the fatigue-inducing nature of this fitness test. The abdominals are contracting repeatedly, which is going to cause the production of lactic acid, which is very painful to the performer. Therefore, the performer will need to push through this pain in order to get a score which is close to their potential. So, to summarise the 1 minute sit-up test, it's primarily used to assess a performer's muscular endurance of their abdominal muscles. Following a sufficient warm-up, the performer needs to lie down on a supportive surface. Their feet should be flat and their knees should be bent at a 90-degree angles. Their hands need to be resting at the base of their thighs. The performer or assistant then starts a 60-second timer and are watching for the correct technique of a sit-up to be performed. The performer raises their shoulders, rounding their back, sliding their hands up their thighs towards their knees so that their fingertips just roll over the top towards their kneecap. The number of times they complete this within a minute is then recorded and compared against normative data to determine if they are above average, at or below average according to their age and gender. The test is great because it requires minimal equipment, it's very quick And if the performer is experienced with this fitness test, they may not require the assistance of a recorder or timer. It's also a very beneficial test for the majority of sports performers because of the abdominal's role in stability and balance. However, some potential drawbacks is that the technique is open for interpretation. So 2 or 3 or 4 assistants watching the same performer might get a different score because they deem some sit-ups to be correct and others to be incorrect. Also, due to the fatigue-inducing nature of this test, it does require high levels of motivation to complete, to push through that pain in order to obtain a score close or at their potential. So that's the 1 minute sit-up test. I hope you found that mini lesson useful. If you did, then feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can be kept up to date with all the video and content that we're going to be bringing you. Alternatively, if you want to learn more about the private tuition or the teaching and learning resources that we provide with PE Tutor, then visit us at thepetutor.com and you can reach out to one of our team. I hope to hear from you or see you soon.